Thank you very much to all three speakers for three different but also very overlapping papers engaging with different sets of texts, and with how these texts from at first sight seem to be saying things about communal identities and boundaries and negotiating boundaries between communities, but on second reading turn out to be saying more about internal issues within communities and hierarchies and negotiations of identities within that. I think the floor is open to questions from the audience now. Yes.
Thank you very much, all great papers. This is for Luke. It's a two-part question, and if I can, the first one is, I think, pretty straightforward, and the second one calls for a wild speculation, which I hope you'll indulge. The first question is, Fazl Pasha, the man who preserved this text, does he give any kind of provenance of where or how this ended up in his hands? How did he get a hold of it? If this is the only copy of it, where did it come from? How did it get from, Tripoli to India in the 19th century? And then the wild speculation question is, given that the fatwas are all, not all of them, but many of them emphasize the importance of the imam for these kinds of social religious decisions, and given that he's praising the Ottoman Sultan on every page, and I think he died before the Khilafat movement, I think you said. I can't remember when you said he died, but I'm assuming he died before the... What time?
1901.
Oh, so around the time of the Khilafat movement. Is it possible that he included this in his Majmu'ah because he was one of these pro-Caliph people, like agitating for the British not to abolish the Caliphate? I don't know if that makes any sense. That's wild speculation. Anyway, thanks.
I'm always game for a little bit of wild speculation. I don't know for sure how Fazl Pasha got a hold of this text. However, my theory is that it's actually from he had the same manuscript, because after he was kicked out of Kerala by the British in 1852, he went to Ta'if, and when you compare the manuscripts line by line, there are some cases where a whole line has dropped out of the lithograph, and that happens at the same vertical point in the manuscript, if that makes sense. So it looks like, the scribe of the lithograph version, which may have been him with his own hand, I'm not sure, went along and skipped down a line. There's a name for that in Greek that I know, but I'm not going to pronounce in your presence. The other question, could he have included this work as a sort of pro-Caliph or pro-Ottoman Sultan statement? I think it's entirely possible, not so much because of the Imam references in these fatwas, but because the work opens with an address to the Sultan Mohamed, Nasir al-Muslimin, and so forth, who I am 75% sure is Nasir Muhammad ibn Qalawun. I mean, the dates line up. It's possible that it's slightly later. Is there another Nasir Muhammad or Mansur? It's possible that it's al-Mansur Muhammad, who's later Qalawunid, but it's much more likely. So in other words, I think it's quite possible that because this work was addressed to the Sultan, urging him to take action against non-Muslims, and many of the other works in Fazl Pasha's Majmu' are doing the same thing in very different contexts from around the Pacific Basin, actually, from Java to China. He may have wanted to address the Ottoman Sultan using this Mamluk era work as well as others.
Yes, question to Luke, but motivated by presentation of Gowaart and the ability of ulama to create problems out of nothing. Were these istifta? How did the process of istifta take place? Did the Sultan, did the Asandamur or Kurji al-Mansuri ask for it, or did they offer their service? Or did anyone other than the Naib Sultana ask for it? And at the end of the istifta, did they take it seriously? Because the Mamluks sometimes consult with the ulama, and then they do as they please. So do we know anything about this specific case?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have no idea what the answer to either question is. You know, there's simply the istifta and the fatwas. I don't even know who wrote it, much less what the procedure would have been. And a further difficulty, I can date it to within this 10-year period, but it's not as though all the ulama are like solidly Damascene or solidly Cairo. I mean, of course they go back and forth, and unless I know exactly in which year it happened, I can't say even where the process of soliciting fatwas would have taken place, or whether it would have gone out to both Cairo and Damascus and then been collected. And I haven't found a study of sort of Mamluk fatwa practice that would delineate some of these options with examples. So I would love to be enlightened about that. And the second question also, I simply don't have the information. I'm sorry.
Yeah, question for all three of you, I guess. It's about the kind of material which you presented was very much kind of autistic material. You know, one community happy among itself, discussing among itself, but the panel was negotiating. So I wondered, to what extent is it possible to trace the agency of the other somewhere in your text? And think about it when you look at the document which Donald Richards edited from the Karaite documents, and which is the best document which we have on synagogue attempt destruction, and which goes on for pages and pages and pages and pages, and where the ulama come in, but then the Jewish community comes in, and with a lot of different groups that play part in the negotiations. Whether this is somehow evident in your text, or whether this is really just among ourselves and the others are just objects of what we discuss.
In my text, it was a collection of letters, so evidently other people like seen it, like the Ethiopian king, and I stressed in one of the letters, it was clear that the Mamluk authorities would read it first. So this is why I'm regarding it as a way for negotiation with the others. Okay, this is why I'm regarding it as a way to negotiating with others. So also in sending like the mushafaha part of each letter is quite important in this period. So sending Anba Yaqub, also he carried a letter. Also the letters of the Pope stress that he has no mushafaha, but he got to be there for a reason. So he negotiated with the Ethiopian king, and the letters are seen with by the Mamluks. So this is why I'm considering it negotiating between different political and social actors. So this is for my text.
Very, very briefly, I think, yeah, that's an excellent question. I think what we're getting in the case of my fatwas, these fatwas, and the book in which they're embedded is one side of really a conversation with the state authorities. I know we don't like the term state, with the Mamluk authorities at the center. In Ibn Taymiyyah's Egypt fatwa about monasteries, he asks the question, okay, why do the churches have all of these vast awqaf to begin with? And he doesn't say it's because it's because they predate the Futuh and they've just had them all along. He says no, in the Fatimid period they had so many Christian and Munafiq Kutab in the Dawaween that they made over all of these properties to the church, and now we're just trying to get them back for the Muslims who they belonged to in the first place. Some of the other works like Al-Qawl al-Mukhtar, like Ibn Durayhim's Manhaj al-Sawab fi Qub' Istiktab Ahl al-Kitab and others, talk about how they can't even get a word in edgewise with the Sultan or with the Emirs because there are always these Coptic Kutab or nominal converts sort of at their ears whispering, don't pay attention to this person, he's slandering you, he's treacherous, blah, blah, blah. So these kinds of fatwas and the works in which they're embedded in this case, I think, are the attempt of the ulama to make their case. I mean, in very crude terms, the attempt of the ulama to make their case to the Mamluk authorities.
Yeah, I think the same is, in a way, is also true of the text I was studying. As you say quite correctly, it seems to be a very self-contained kind of discussion. He's addressing other ulama, although there are points where he sort of gives a voice to the Christian and Jewish opponents, but yeah, it seems quite unlikely. I mean, it's very much mediated, and he calls them all kinds of nasty names. But I think what I also try to do a little bit here is you could reconstruct the ways Jewish and Christian communities dealt with these kind of discourses by contextualizing the text, and then so I was looking at the analytic works where these accounts of the text are actually embedded in accounts which really deal with anti-Christian or anti-dhimmi violence and anti-dhimmi state measures, etc. So I have the impression that this discourse is in a way self-contained, but it uses the dhimmis as a sort of a scapegoat. They don't really get a voice in the matter, but they are used as a scapegoat to sort of to pin their arguments, and actually, as Luke has argued repeatedly, to gain their own social position. I mean, to struggle in that struggle, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. This question to anybody who can answer it. There was a case during Nasr Mohamed ibn Qalawun that, and my question to go forward, what is the rule not only for the places of worship, but for entrusted Copts who were in the royal court? So there was one who was entrusted, and anyway, somebody plotted against him during Nasr Muhammad. My question, who would get a fatwa would be against a person, or the qadis would present it to the sultan to depose him? So in short, after some time he was deposed, and it's found in the riwayah that his house was full of pickled cats and khamr and other things. In other words, political plotting. I mean, pickled cats, that's a big thing, to do. So who would give the authority, as opposed to places of worship, to depose somebody from being near to the sultan, accumulating wealth, a Copt, and then suddenly he's being deposed? Would it be another Copts, or would it be Muslims during a maja'a, a hunger, or whatever, a hardship and befallen the sultanate? Thank you.
By depose, are you talking about like a Coptic katib who uzala min mansibi or something like that?
And confiscated property.
Musadara. Yeah, who exactly has the agency in that, I think, would depend on the level of official that you're talking about. If it's really someone close to the sultan, it's like the Mustawfi or something like that, then it would almost have to be the sultan himself who would give the decree. And I have not seen a case that gives the details of this.
There's a case where Ibn al-Amari complained about. This is a famous case where Ibn al-Qutb was appointed to very high office, and Ibn Fadl al-Amari refused to write his letter of investiture, and he refused to Nasr Muhammad. He said, I will not appoint Hal-Qibti. He did a little pun on the guy's name was Ibn al-Qutb, and he said this Qibti who is an Aslami, basically somebody who just pretended to be a convert, and it took his father, Ibn Fadlallah's father, to come and apologize for his son's behavior so he wouldn't get thrown in prison. But that's an example of a very high level.
Okay, well, I think we have to end it there and thank our panelists.